with agriculture? And my answer to that is everything. Now, of course, you remember that the main reason that people got into agriculture in the first place after the Stone Age was for sustenance, of course, the means to which to supplement their food. Then after there was commercialization, and then, of course, the conversation around sustenance, incomes, and livelihoods and that sort of thing. Well, we want to knit that all together for you in a modern ecosystem. And my guests are still here with us today to discuss what cultural biodiversity really means. I'll start off with Anne. Karibu sana. Thank you for taking the time to talk to us.
Asante.
I'd like you to start off from telling us about your organization, what you do, and why cultural biodiversity.
Thank you very much. My name is Anne Maina from the Biodiversity and Biosafety Association of Kenya.
Yes.
This is a network of 47 member organizations, broad range from faith-based organizations, community-based organizations,
Yes.
NGOs, animal welfare networks. Our work is hinged on biodiversity conservation by keeping Kenyans aware and alert on issues that affect biodiversity. The reason we are working on issues of biocultural diversity is because our culture is very important in terms of maintaining our biodiversity. If you look at the traditional system, for example, my mother comes from Nyeri.
Yes.
And growing up, I loved going to the village. I was brought up in Nairobi, but going to the village, and you could see there were crops that were for women and crops for the men. Like I know my grandfather is the one who would go and harvest the yams that we loved so much.
Yes.
For my grandmother, should be able to cultivate the vegetables and everything else that we need in the farm. By bringing in those cultural diversity aspects, we're able to bring back cultural practices. If you look, for example, at farmers not far from here in Lari, we have a member organization called Institute for Culture and Ecology, and this organization is working in a place called Kamburu. And when they went there, the farmers were growing tea, and of course the tea is owned by the men,
Yes.
until the door of the homestead. And the women didn't have a space to grow vegetables. So when we brought in issues of cultural biodiversity in the discussions, and the old men, the intergenerational learning, the old men and women and the younger one were able to talk, they reached a point where a woman in the homestead needs to have a space to grow crops for the family. And when the women got that kind of space, they were able to grow so many vegetables, they were now going to the next villages to sell their vegetables. You see the importance of culture. Culture is also important in conserving, for example, forests. We don't go just cutting down trees. They are cultural and they are spiritual trees. For example, among the Kikuyus, the Mugumo tree is very much revered. And not only in Kenya, in many countries that I have traveled, you find the Mugumo tree is very much taken very seriously and very much revered by most communities.
So then people would ask where the rain started beating us. Where did the breakdown of these cultural aspects break down to the point where we now say that we need to have interventions?
I think with the colonialism, immediately when colonialism came and the colonialists brought the Bible and asked us to go to school and abandon our cultural practices, then we began losing them. And the kind of, should I say, brainwashing that happened, we started seeing like what we used to do traditionally is backward. The cultural practices when you are circumcising young men, we saw it as backward. Of course, there are some which are not very good. For example, the circumcision of girls, and those had to be abandoned.
Yes.
And that's why you saw aspects like the emergence of the independent churches.
Yes.
Because you found the colonialists came and found a man had 5 wives. And the colonialist says, the Bible says only 1 wife. So what could that man do? Does he abandon his five wives and 4 wives and remain with 1? And so it's important to note that some of our cultural practices are very important. In fact, most of them, just a few that were not very good. And I think most communities have gone beyond that. But it is important because you're seeing like a case of now, a lot of young people cannot even cope with the pressure, mental challenges, because we've gone into some cocoons. You want to live in the high-rise building, you don't interact with your neighbor, you lock yourself in drinking, and that becomes a big challenge in our society. Those practices of going to the village, next village, having discussions under the tree at night when you're eating roasted maize with your grandmother and she's telling you stories.
In fact, now in Kikuyu land, they have a derogative name for it. They call it mungedo. Well, you just go and sit and chat. Let's bring in Simon. So, Simon, I want you to talk to us about what it is that you do, the Alternative Learning Center, SALT, what SALT means, even in the local language aspect, because I think this would be very interesting.
Yeah, thank you, Wakaba. My name is Simon Mitambo. I'm the CEO of SALT.
Yes.
SALT stands for Society for Alternative Learning and Transformation.
Yes.
We like calling it SALT because when you miss salt in food, for example, the food loses taste.
Yes.
So it is also there very symbolically to show that the kind of work we are doing is work that when it really misses out, something gets wrong. So the Society for Alternative Learning and Transformation is a platform. I see it like a platform or a home of individuals and organizations that seek to revive deep sense of their cultural identity and also self-governance. And mainly we have been working around reviving our traditional seats, which are very critical, and also issues of protection of the sacred natural site. Within our territory, there are those critical spaces.
Yes.
Some of them are wetlands and those kind of things, water towers, that where we really think that our spirit existent,
Yes.
but also very, very important in our day-to-day lives. And also the other thing also we do is where I come from and the communities that SALT work with, they are communities that are agro-pastoralists. So we also use our animals also to regenerate the territory by the way we do our grazing, not ways that we degrade, but the way we regenerate.
Yes.
So much of what we do a lot of bringing things together to be connected.
Yes.
For example, when we talk about seed, seed does not just stop to being food. It is more than food. It is something that you always need it when you have a ceremony.
Yes.
And you find that also particular seed has a meaning for that particular kind of thing. So diversity of reviving all these, our traditional seeds, when we talk about the cultural biodiversity, we are really talking about how do we bring all these biological diversity of all these things, and how do they also play around our cultural practices. For example, when it comes to farming, there are some of the ceremonies that we have to do. There are some of when we wait for the rain, we don't just wait for the rain because it is going to come and rain, but also we prepare the land so that when the rain is a very serious gift from our Mother Nature.
Yes.
So it is something that should find a land that is well prepared in terms of cleansing and that kind of thing. And this has implication in terms of how we produce our food and how we relate with our food and how we relate with the whole aspect of our collective well-being. So this is the kind of thing that we do. And most of it, everything in it also is very much interrelated. Yeah.
So when you think about what you've said and the aspects of things like the rainfall and its impact on growth, and then the seeds, and then your ceremonies, this is all interconnected.
Yeah.
But then from what they say a modernist perspective, the contemporary aspect where you'll be told we rely on science. So people will give you models to predict when the rain is coming or not. Like now they're telling us we are in an El Nino cycle.
Yeah.
And then we've gone into things like monoculture, monocropping, so clearing the land for just one sort of thing. And we can see the impact and damage that has. From where you sit and thinking of this as one large, multi-connected ecosystem, one universe, talk to us about where you start in terms of being able to tell that it is going to rain or not, the sort of local science behind that, the fact that we have been with this land for generations, so we can see the signs that the scientists keep telling us, they're showing us. It's just that people have not focused. How do you put all that together?
Yeah, actually, what I would say is that when we say about science, sometimes we also forget that our indigenous knowledge is also science.
Yes.
But I see it as a very complex science. Like when we talk about cultural diversity or biocultural diversity, you know, we are talking about how does culture come in to play around also with the biological and the genetic aspect.
Yes.
You know, it's very complex. For example, where I come from, there is a whole practice around how do people work with the seeds. If you come from a certain clan, you don't marry, you don't plant seed from this, yes. And if you plant, you find that there is an effect in that. So what I see is that science is not good, it's not bad, sorry. Science is also good, but also when we say science is also not cast on stone. That, for example, when we say that science will come and say, when you practice monoculture, for example, if you look from our traditional practices, we used to have this mixed kind of planting. For example, when our old mothers would go to plant, they would plant a mix of cowpeas, yes. Millet, sorghum, finger millet, all mixed together. And this was a way of distributing risk. Because if there is any disease that comes, if there is no rain, anything can happen during that time. But also, when you look at it, is that there are some of the crops that also survive very well in those kind of things. So the advantage is that you don't miss out completely. Yes, but if it is just one particular crop, for example, you find that if a disease comes, it just wipes all that. And of course, the way we relate with all this, even in terms of nutritional value, you find that we are better placed when we have diversity of all this to even eat better and to have better nutrition. And this is why we see this also practice very good. But also science can work with indigenous knowledge, of course with respect. Yes. Because again, the way science appreciates, science I see it like very empirical, more logical, but some things also don't also go with the reason. Yes. There are things that happen and then you cannot explain it from a logical or linear point of view because it's something that has complexity. Like when you want to go somewhere, you find that the whole process of getting there is also very valuable. So you have to bring all this together.
Okay, interesting. And I want you to come in at this juncture. And from the point of view that when people have been used to doing things in a certain way for so long, we as Kenyans, we as various tribes, we as people in this part of the world have become a sort of, I'll say, localized, Africanized version of, so to say, Mzungu, some colonial thing which became what we are. It's given us our education, it's given us our way of dressing, given us our way of life. Has it been difficult to get people to start to see that there's a challenge in that and start to appreciate that going back to their roots might be worthwhile?
I think, yes, it was very difficult at the start. We've been doing this for the past, for me, like 20, maybe Simon, another 25 years. It was very difficult at first. In fact, some places you would go and bring in aspects of culture, you'd get condemned, like you're taking us back to the traditional and spiritual aspects that are not understood. Yes. Like Simon said, for example, if you look at issues of cultural or what we are calling sacred natural sites. Yes. These are very important because they are biological hotspots. And they are revered and feared. And so if you go to a place, for example, a place where the Mogumo tree, around the Mogumo tree, when you bring those aspects and you are talking to communities, at first they were very fearful. But now when you brought in the issues of the older generation, that intergenerational learning, and of course nature has a way of protecting itself. Yes. And you've heard like people who have gone and, for example, women cut down branches of the Mogumo tree that they're going to use as wood fire. It has had very many implications, or the falling down of a Mogumo tree. But for us, we are coming from the aspect where we are talking about these cultural or biological hotspot areas, which we need to conserve.